Sorry about that. We are back. A therapy office, not therapy, my psychiatrist's office just called and was like, hey, we had you scheduled for an appointment on Monday, but would you like to have an appointment today in 15 minutes? And I'm like, I literally saw her like a few days ago. Why would I want to have another appointment with her? It's crazy work. Anyway, Terry wrote him off, likely aware that Cove could not help being wet, turning to face you. Miranda and Baxter, the three that stood there in the way of her night, continuing for an hour or two more. What about you, Princeton? Randy? Baxter? Want to see some fireworks? Terry continued on without waiting for an answer. Isn't it all about summer experiences? What's more summer than fireworks? It's fireworks, we gotta go. Cove's right, that's too much, you didn't say anything. It's fireworks, we gotta go. I guess they are fireworks. Alright, whatever. Where's one more scene change? Yush! I knew this was a good idea. In turn, four sets of eyes looked to Baxter as the driver. His answer made or broke the plan. He chuckled softly. And for a penny and for a pound, I'll go. Genuinely, there's nothing better to occupy my time tonight. We better hurry or we might miss it. Cole rolled his eyes but laughed. There was no time to lose. The fireworks were sure to start soon. If you didn't want to miss any part of it, that meant you needed to book it now. The gang hurried into the car and were slowly blessed with the warmth after Baxter turned on the heater and it began to kick in. Terry wiggled in her seat, proudly announcing that she had the additional gift of seat warmers to the envy of everyone else in the car. However, the goal wasn't to sit there enjoying modern accommodations. It was to get back out of the car as quickly as possible. It took a while to get out of the winding streets of the neighborhood, but eventually Baxter reached the freeway and zipped straight to the city. For the second time that day, you were met with the silhouettes of skyscrapers in the near distance, but now they were illuminated by explosive bursts of greens and purples. It's starting! Oh no, are we going to miss it? Baxter's hand rested on the gear shift, digits curling against the handle. Is he driving a manual? Before he switched into the right lane to exit off the freeway. Wait, the GPS said... No, there's somewhere outside the city that I intend to visit. I believe you can stop there and catch the show. It's an unblocked viewing area. Baxter, you are brilliant! Pedal to the metal, unless you're already speeding, then don't go any faster. Clothing turned toward Miranda, but she was hardly paying attention, her hands covering her cheeks as she cheered Baxter on while simultaneously advocating for traffic safety. Baxter tightened his grip on the wheel, changing a few more lanes before he exited and threaded it through another tangle of local streets. Eventually, the car rumbled to a stop as a waterside path appeared in the dark. Everyone piled out after the others, sprinting from the parking lot. Cole, Miranda, and Terry scrambled up the edge of the path at the water's edge. Baxter stayed in the middle between the start and the end, folding his arms as he hovered behind the crew. His eyes were less fixated on the sights unfolding before you than they were focused on the other three. High in the sky and far away, it was a perfect way to watch fireworks, less crowded than it would have been in the city and quieter than it would have been there too. It was kind of funny. You and the group lived in or around the city almost all your lives, and it was Baxter who found this place for you to enjoy. Tourists did tend to put in effort to find scenic spots. People who could theoretically see something every day didn't take the opportunities around them. Ooh! Randy pointed out a golden firework and beamed. Ah, that's so cool! Terry held up a hand for a high five and Miranda obliged her. Terry whooped and shot you a smile. What color do you think the next one will be? Without giving Baxter a glance, Cove answered immediately. Green. It was orange. Baxter chuckled, but he wasn't interested in calling Cove out for being wrong. Is that your favorite color? Green. It's one of them. I think that's nice. It matches you. And yours black? That's one of them. Cove smirked just a little and left the conversation there. You stayed next to Baxter, you joined Terry and Miranda, you came up next to Cove, you lingered near the car. I'm gonna stay next to my boyfriend, thank you. Baxter had continued watching the other three before he suddenly turned left. His eyes were on you as soon as you'd gotten near. How do you do, Princeton? Enjoying the view? Yeah, it's gorgeous, I think so. You shrugged. It's alright. Honestly, I'm freezing. I'm a little uncomfortable being out here. Honestly, I'm freezing. Would you prefer to wait in the car instead? I can turn on the heat again. It's no trouble. Thanks, I'd appreciate it. Those had taken notice of your absence at the waterfront and had been migrating the crowd further back. Baxter glanced over his shoulder when he noticed you staring at something behind him. He waved as they jogged to the car's side. Is everything okay? And are you? Miranda's Miranda's brows knitted together with clear worry. I shouldn't have done that. I should not have said what I said. I should have been like, oh no, it's gorgeous, but I decided to be difficult. We can head home if you're not. Yeah, it's no problem. You know what I just realized? I left a plate in the bed. And this dog probably has licked it all clean. I'm surprised he hasn't. Oh, there's a little heart imprint in it. Jax, go back to lying down. Go back to lying down. I did not want you to get up. I've given you like 2 treats already. They were sweet for worrying, but you shook your head. It wouldn't be right to make everyone go home because you didn't feel great. No, I'm okay. I need a quick breather. I'll be in the car. Hey, no worries. Just rest up. Still, despite your reassurances, Cove searched your eyes for any answers to the contrary. Do you want me to go with you? You don't have to. Could you? It's fine. You should go with Terry. You know, his offer, you shook your head. You should go with Terry and Miranda. Cove smiled softly before quietly retreating. He stopped to take another look at you on his way to the water's edge, but eventually relented as you waved him on. The car unlocked, and Baxter slid into the driver's seat while you saddled into the front seat. Ooh, this is romantic. The engine roared to life after Baxter put the keys into the ignition and turned on the heat. With the car still facing the water, you were able to see the fireworks, albeit from behind the windshield in the comfort of the car. It was more relaxing from there. In the end, you were glad you'd been upfront with how you felt. This is much preferable than trying to put on a brave face. Baxter leaned into his seat, hand resting again comfortably on the gear shift. The fireworks sprayed colors across the sky, and for a moment you were holding your breath before whatever came next. No words could adequately describe the anticipation. Even though it had gotten toasty in the car, you couldn't help wrapping your arms around yourself, trying to trap the warmth. Baxter tilted closer, but kept enough distance between you to remain polite. His eyes met yours in wordless invitation, half lifting an arm in case you needed it to come closer. You rested your head against his shoulder, you shook his head. You took his hand, you wrapped your arms around his. You snuggled up with him. You smiled reassuringly. Fine, I'm snuggling up. You slid into his arms, a puzzle piece fitting into the right place. He hummed low and agreeable as he held you close enough to press his warmth to you. You could feel his heartbeat through your thin clothes. He readjusted your position so that you could both see the fireworks and rested his head comfortably on top of your shoulder. You ended up with the gear shift pressed between you, but it was worth it. Your eyes continued to search the sky when Baxter spoke up. His voice was impossibly quiet in the way that things are when it was important. You look amazing, do you know that? The fireworks show immediately became unimportant. They might have all fizzled out into nothing as far as you'd been aware. Oh, thank you. Why did you say that? You were too embarrassed to even reply. You know you're wonderful. The corners of his eyes crinkled as his gaze settled on the horizon, though you couldn't tell if it was out of amusement of the situation or some unexpected shyness. In the dim light, you could make out the glare of those fireworks in his eyes. They hadn't vanished after all. I've been meaning to tell you that all day, since we were at the beach. When we were walking side by side after the ice cream truck left, and in your bedroom. Oh, what? What? Nothing stood out in your memory as particularly unique. It was so natural that time you spent together, but now that he'd gone and said it, you had to accept the reality that he'd been anticipating this since the very beginning. You player, you. The whole time, Baxter had been waiting for an opportunity to say something. It may surprise you to know I'm not adept at picking my words. I care a great deal about what I say and that it makes the correct impression. Yet I am not always successful. My approach is off, really. Fortunately, even I could realize there's not a right moment to tell you that. Then we got here, and I thought this was what feels right. I hope I'm not wrong after all, but even if I am, the words are true all the same. So, you look amazing. And even after all that, I fear amazing does not adequately express what I think. How regrettable. You smiled at him. You leaned in to kiss his lips. You leaned to kiss his cheek. You cuddled even closer. Kiss him! There was a pretty good chance there was nothing on earth that could truly embarrass Baxter, nothing that you could do at least. He didn't even flinch or start with surprise when you leaned in to press your lips against his. Instead, his fingers grazed your cheek, soft enough to burn, and kissed you in turn. He moved in closer, laughing when you accidentally bumped your nose into his. Your lips parted, and the ever-growing temptation to kiss him again stayed when he touched his forehead to yours. His breath lingered in the small space between you both. One explosion of color followed another, and the exuberance of your friends couldn't be measured. You'd seen fireworks before. They weren't anything new, but all those times you attended events before, it wasn't anything close to this. You nearly missed it, and it wasn't even a show, really, for you to see. That's what made it special, the effort it took for you to get there, the place you were watching from, and the people that you were watching with. The finale of the fireworks took center stage. Dozens scattered across the sky, the sparks of them descended into the sea below. It was as if they were impossibly far away, distant stars, and yet also close enough to reach out and touch them. In the back of your mind, you knew there would likely never be another day exactly like that one. When it was over, it'd be over forever. And that made it a precious experience. You vowed to hold on to the memories, feelings, and this one single moment for as long as you possibly could. Aww. That's nice. Okay, drinks. Here we go, drinks. It was late enough in the day that you were surprised to hear a knock on the door. Seeing who was waiting on the other side only doubled the surprise. Good evening, Princeton. I've returned from my journey. Girl, where the fuck did you go? Baxter's smile warmed like it was still the middle of the afternoon. Your confusion must have been written all across your face. He laughed as if he could read your thoughts. It was almost a week ago that you found Baxter in the same exact spot. He spun a tale about how he put in place some plans to visit old acquaintances in Northern California after his parents had told him they were sending him the Sunset Bird. Baxter assumed being in the same statement that he was reasonably close for a visit, but he learned the hard way how daunting it would be to drive himself to the opposite end of California. Before he left, how close are we to Mexico? That's what I want to know. Before he left, Baxter ended that conversation with a promise. On his return, he would tell you of his arrival in person, and there he was, true to his word. He's not tired? Babes, you're not sleepy? A drive that long, you gotta be tired as fuck, bro. It is lovely to see you again. I feel I've been away for an age. That arrangement had seemed like a stroke of brilliance, adding more adventure to my stay in the state and assuring myself I'd see friendly faces for at least once in the season. Yet truthfully, I wouldn't have promised such a lengthy trip away from town if I had known who my neighbor was going to be. As pleasant as they were, it simply doesn't compare to what I have here. I missed you. I hope you still have fun. Wow, I'm so flattered at you, Cheese. You know, I don't mind if you have other things you'd rather do sometimes. You blushed and looked away. You smiled. I miss you. Stunned, Baxter stopped talking. You beat him to the punch, but his surprise quickly morphed into pure delight. I missed you as well. Before anything else, you let Baxter actually come in. He cordially joined you in the family living room. With the greetings and pleasantries all done and an invitation to talk extended, he got right to the point, as you would have expected from him. Now, I hope I'm not being too forward, but I would like to spend more time with you. Right now? In fact, I was wondering if I might take you on a date. Right now? I spoke so boldly about that desire before, and it's long overdue. If that's what you also want, of course. Right now? Yeah, I've been waiting for this. I was hoping that could happen too. Does it have to be called a date? I'd rather hang out with you normally. You nod in full agreement. You frowned at the prospect. Yeah, I've been waiting for this, babes. But right now? Crossing your arms, you made it obvious he hadn't needed to ask. Any trace of caution in his expression vanished, and a wide, confident grin took its place. I'm thrilled to hear that. And obviously, the tentative date would be based on our own schedule. It'd be ghastly if I expected you to drop everything simply because I've only now made myself available. Okay, we're good then. Because, right now would be crazy, brother. Whatever works best for you, I will accommodate accordingly. It is late today, so I don't expect that, but I am entirely free tomorrow. Sighing, your shoulders slumped, and then your head hung forward. Baxter lightly scratched the side of his neck. Sorry, this is me. Sorry, but I'm spending tomorrow afternoon at a family thing. I probably won't be back home until pretty late. But we could do something in the morning, as long as you don't mind it being kind of short. He placed the suggestion hopefully. It seemed like it'd be a good compromise, but it was hard to tell what Baxter thought. He stood there silently. The look on his face changed. It was strange. There was a problem, certainly. But if he was free, and so were you, what could be that much of a roadblock? We hang out some other day if it's not what you had in mind. We can hang out some other day if it's not what you had in mind. His expression shifted again, and not for the better. Whatever caught him off guard in the first place was nothing in comparison. Baxter was getting even more protruded. And just as quickly, Baxter snapped out of it. He released a steady breath and regained much of his usual relaxed composure with his next inhale. Forgive me for being distracted. Your idea is perfectly manageable, more than in fact. I'd prefer if we didn't push things off to another day. How about we go to a cafe and get a coffee or tea, or whatever you drink. Whatever drink you prefer. How about some hot apple cider? That would be lovely. That would be lovely, actually. I've seen some very nice ones when I've been out exploring the area, but I haven't patronized any of them yet. That sounds good. Let's do it. Excellent. Tomorrow morning it is, then. It was always going to be a busy day, but at least now tomorrow had an added dash of excitement. The anticipation was mutual, and Baxter's tone sweetened. You got all the details squared away. Baxter volunteered to play driver for the short trip, and you planned to drop by his house in the morning once you'd gotten ready. When that was settled, there was nothing left to do other than to say your goodbyes for the night. Baxter politely dipped his head. Bye, have a good night. You as well. I'll see you soon, Princeton. As you turned to go, you found little ways to stretch the seconds, lingering for as long as you could. Then, he was gone. The rest of the night passed pleasantly. Your thoughts wandered along all the fun paths tomorrow could unfold. The next morning, you were up and out the door like a whirlwind. Your eyes were set on your goal as you went up the hill and across the street to Baxter's condo. Knocking on the door, you tried to guess the cafe Baxter had in mind. He'd mentioned before that there were a few that caught his eye, but you weren't sure what that meant exactly. Your growing curiosity wouldn't have to wait much longer. Maybe it would. As you stood in front of Baxter's shut condo, you gradually realized it was taking quite a while for him to answer the door. Much more than normal. Blinking, your head swiveled as you double-checked for your own sanity that you had the right house. You did, but Baxter was still nowhere to be seen. You rang the doorbell next. Another couple minutes passed, and finally you began to hear a faint clattering inside the house. The door pulled open a crack. It was barely enough to see Baxter on the other side, wearing a half-lidded daze, and not his usual outfit. That was for sure. Baxter, everything all right? He yawned loudly and then sluggishly followed your line of sight to look down at himself. He frowned, and the second it clicked that he wasn't dressed for the event, you guessed that those were his pajamas. I deeply apologize, Princeton. I need an additional moment before we could leave. I'm running late, it seems. As he shut the door, you were left there on his doorstep entirely at a loss. His bizarre behavior was unexplainable, at least for the second it took for your brain to completely process what had happened. It dawned on you that this was the first time you'd actually seen Baxter before noon, and how that might not be a random coincidence. He wasn't a morning person. Not him coming outside in his PJs. Sir, why is his top so low cut, too? Interesting. Suddenly the door flung all the way open, nearly knocking you backwards. Baxter was back, and this time you got a full view. Baxter was indeed wearing only his pajamas, black and white PJs, of course. Excuse me, that was rather impolite. You couldn't tell by his tone of voice which indicated he was even referring to, shutting the door in your face or the way the situation was dragging on forever. It was hard to know. But Baxter moved aside enough for you that you could pass by. Why don't you come in? Baxter's exhaustion was worrisome, but you shuffled inside anyway. It probably upset him more to leave. You walked through the entryway and into the living room. Ooh, what is this? Why is there a random triangle? Or is that supposed to be like a sail? I'm looking at this and I noticed this and I'm like, oh, nautical. That is not a random triangle. It is probably a sailboat. You paused to take in the space, unable to help yourself. After all those years trying to avoid this condo, you were actually inside. Honestly, you never thought that would happen. But as much as you wanted to explore, there were even more unexpected things taking precedence. Your attention returned to Baxter. He closed the door and followed behind. Baxter pinched the bridge of his nose between his thumb and forefinger as his feet dragged. Please, do take a seat. I'm so sorry for not being prepared. I set an alarm for an hour ago, and I know I heard it go off. Somehow, in a matter of moments, the hour disappeared, and now you're here, and I have little doubt about your punctuality. He moved his hand up to his forehead, with his palm as if to catch the memories lost inside. You didn't rush him, instead settling yourself in a chair. I don't know how this could have happened. It's unexcusable. That his words, not mine. Baxter's words became too mumbled and faint to understand. That brought your gaze back to him directly. You got an eyeful of his exposed stomach. His stomach is not exposed. He's not wearing a crop top. Baxter was in the process of taking off his shirt over his head, but in his groggy state the material had caught between his ears. He's so precious. Baxter, maybe don't do that here. You yelped. You snickered quietly. Unbothered, you waited for him to finish. You silently flush. I'm gonna silently flush. Because I'm not gonna stop this man from stripping. If he wants to strip, go ahead. You had no idea how to act in the situation, especially since Baxter wasn't completely aware of what he was doing. Embarrassed, you hid your face in your hands and waited for it to be over. I'm not gonna do all that. That's too much. But you still peeked through your fingers when you realized it was worse not knowing what was happening. Baxter readjusted his shirt after failing to get it off, working through the tiredness to conceptualize the plan B. Why don't you just unbutton it, babes? Unless those aren't buttons or snaps. Then he hazily met your eye. Baxter held it for several heartbeats, and then his brows bent up. Did something happen? Your blush burned bright hotter. Nodding, you kept yourself hidden. Are you okay? What's wrong? You shook your head, and the situation gradually dawned on Baxter. He glanced down at his wrinkled clothes. Oh, no, that's not correct. I'm sorry. I'm used to living with drummer mates. They don't care about that sort of behavior. I've lost my manners. I'll go change properly in my room. No, come back. Come back. I didn't mean it. Please, stay here. I'll be back in 2 shakes. And with that, the situation was out of your hands. You watched him fumble his way through the room. Baxter made it upstairs, and the slam of the door sent the house rattling. The following dead silence only lasted a split second. Sorry! His voice rang out from what you assumed was his bedroom. His next words were even clearer. He must have opened the door again to speak. I didn't mean to do that at all. That's okay. I think I pulled the door too hard. No problem, that happens. I swear the noise was completely unintentional. He's so funny. You know what's not funny, though? Wherever this dog is. I see him. He's staring at me from under my desk. From, like, the opposite side of my desk. And I can smell his stinky breath. Either that or his poots. Because I just gave him a bath, so it's not that. He didn't add anything else after that. You remained where he left you in a rapidly growing state of disbelief. To put it nicely, Baxter was a total mess, and somehow the universe deemed you worthy of having a front row seat. It was kind of fun to know he wasn't always so poised. The whole thing was hilarious. You felt bad about bothering him clearly at a bad time. That was extremely cute. You were annoyed he couldn't get his act together. He's so cute. Despite it not being Baxter's ideal part of the day, he was still trying so hard to make it work. That consideration and intent meant a lot. And the bedhead, pajamas, and groggy silliness was an added bonus that you were going to treasure. After a few minutes, the clumsy bumping around upstairs faded. As part of you considered the chances of whether or not he had fallen asleep somewhere, the sound of careful footsteps soon banished that thought. Baxter returned downstairs and probably dressed as well. He drifted his fingers along the buttons of his shirt, double-checking that everything was in order. Here I am. Good morning. You were pleasantly surprised to see him already. Hopefully he was actually doing well as he was trying to. Hey, good morning. I can't emphasize this enough. Thank you so much for your patience. I apologize for that unnecessary bump in our plans. Baxter graciously moved beyond his earlier antics. If you hadn't witnessed it firsthand, you probably wouldn't have believed it had even happened. Though, as you observed him more, you noted the signs. He hadn't erased all evidence of a few moments ago yet, if you knew how to look for it. His usual pristine and deliberately put-together outfit was pulled and tucked in the wrong places. There were even wrinkles. Baxter turned his head in an attempt to suppress a yawn, and there was a dull edge to his entire demeanor. He wasn't quite reached his usual razor-sharp wit yet. It was all right. You quite enjoyed the soft, easygoing state of Baxter. You're welcome. Are you really all right? You don't have to do this. So you're not a morning person. It really wasn't any trouble. You smiled reassuringly. It really wasn't any trouble, babes. I appreciate hearing that. The corner of his mouth hooked into a grin. You both knew he was a dollop of trouble, no matter what you said about it. But then his eyes slipped, and you could see Baxter's guilt surfacing. I should admit directly that mornings are, as you might have surmised, a challenge. It wasn't always this way. Jax, what's wrong? Okay, guys, I'll BRB. Jax needs me. Okay, I'm back. I swear the older I get, the more early hours become a chore. I got up at dawn for school years, but college allowed me to actively avoid morning classes altogether. Now I can't remember the last time I had an occasion to be out before 11 at the earliest. Baxter rubbed the back of his neck. His frustration with himself was palpable. I feel that, but I'm up early now, so... Seriously, you don't need to feel that? Some people are built that way. Nevertheless, it's jarring to be entirely lost for a specific chunk of the day. I expected I would have a rough start, but I never thought I'd handle the occasion this poorly. I certainly would have been better choices if I knew this was the sight I'd be showing you. The intensity in his voice gradually lessened until the final part was delivered quietly. He couldn't even look at you as he muttered, "But if you're still interested, I would be thrilled to go have our charming cafe breakfast. It would be a shame to miss out on the chance." Of course I'm interested. I'd like that, but I'm driving. Would it be alright if I drove your car? I'm not as tired. I'm driving. Baxter chuckled and scratched the side of his cheek bashfully. Out of everything that happened this morning, this was what visibly embarrassed him. I accept your courteous offer. Great. It was a relief that Baxter agreed so easily. Not much could ruin the event for real, but a car crash would manage that quite effectively. Baxter scuffed over the ground as he followed you out to the condo. He simply shut the door before walking into the street. Hey, Baxter, you might want to lock that. Did you forget to lock the door? You shrugged it off. There was nothing else to do after all. Clove didn't lock his door either. They had that in common. Did you forget to lock your door? You couldn't believe he was about to leave the neighborhood like that? Well, with normal Baxter, you couldn't believe it. It made perfect sense with morning Baxter. Baxter paused, his face scrunched up in confusion. He pointed at the condo. He followed the motion, peering over his shoulder. Ah, good catch, thank you. He waited by the car while he hurried back. From what you could observe, Baxter didn't need any more help locking the front door this time. Though he hesitantly glanced in your direction before he moved, you gave him a thumbs up. Baxter rejoined you on the road. You may have been living in a daze, but when Baxter was standing at the driver's side of the car, you could see his focus sharpen. He unlocked the vehicle before offering you the keys. You gladly accepted them, and he held the door open while you climbed inside. Baxter closed it and went to the opposite side. See, the thing is, though, Baxter's living alone. He's not living with other people, so no one's home. So if he, didn't lock the door and, someone else, lived there, I'd be like, okay. But because he lives by himself, you don't know. You never know. Nice, quiet neighborhoods get hit up all the time. They get hit up all the time. He slid into the passenger seat and positioned himself with his elbow leaning against the car. Baxter silently watched as you got acquainted with the car. You were both ready. Baxter promptly brought up the directions to the cafe. Here we are. Sighing contentedly, you leaned into the car and soaked in the morning sun coming in through the window. You were optimistic that the date was going to be great. The drive wasn't long at all, and no issues came along. It was smooth sailing. You hopped out, and the scents wafted from the cafe, sorry, that's just a funny word to me, were enough to pull you towards the propped open front door. Do you need your keys yet? Ah, those. You held his keyring out and his puzzled gaze eventually found them. He let out a tiny laugh and pocketed his keys. I may need them one day. Thanks for driving. No problem. Once you were inside, the intermingled smells became easier to decipher. Chocolate, cinnamon, bacon, and eggs, and most especially, coffee. There was something about that particular brew of coffee that immediately reminded you of your parents. Gross. The two of them loved to have long, easy mornings in the kitchen with the mugs of coffee between them on the counter. They might be doing that at home that very minute. Before you could tug on the thread of thought further, a waiter passed by you carrying a sliced quiche. Ooh. I like me quiche. I like mini quiche, though. Like a big quiche, like a regular size quiche. I call regular size quiches big quiches because they're too big. Mini quiche are the perfect type of quiche. They're perfect. They're like small and like delicious. Like, I can eat several. Several mini quiche. You breathed deeply, picking out various ingredients before your eyes could confirm it. It looked impressively made. Baxter led you towards the showcases. There were even added baskets of bread and other treats there. Each inch of space was fully stocked with options. Clearly, coming early has its advantages. Whether you ate anything or not, the sight was delightful. There was a charm to how they presented their fresh pastries. There was words he used when pitching the place. Charming. Baxter was right on the money there. It was a pleasant little cafe with a comfortably quiet atmosphere. Though it was a bit more formal than a typical coffee joint, you couldn't sit anywhere or order at the front. A member of the waitstaff needed to seat and serve you. You found the detail to be a Baxter thing. It was absolutely him to choose a sit-down restaurant even for a casual breakfast. Sit-down restaurants are casual. What are you talking about? A server came over and gestured you to follow her through the room. She brought you to a shiny two-seater table and passed out the menus. Where I don't know where I got pushed from. Welcome, I'll bring some water, but if there's anything else you'd like to drink, I can put an order in now, or you can take some time to think about it. You'd be a lifesaver if you brought me a black coffee, please. Just water for me? I do. I know what I'd like. They have apple juice, a glass of juice, hot chocolate. I could go with the hot chocolate. Gotcha! I'll get that right out. Just relax and browse the menu, and you're welcome to take a peek at the front and see what baked goods you have prepared today. She clicked her pen closed and then left you two alone. Baxter sunk in his seat, slinging one arm over the back. His eyelids fell heavily closed, but his smile remained serenely in place. Please order to your heart's content, whatever you fancy, but don't be alarmed that I don't have much of an appetite in comparison. Coffee is all I need this morning. I get that. Of course you'd only want black coffee. Are you sure you don't want even a little bit to eat? Well, so much for us getting breakfast together, you tease. I wasn't planning on eating anything either. You quietly browsed the menu. I'm gonna tease him. Baxter perked up at your joke. You laughed at the corner of his mouth and pulled up playfully. I recall that my suggestion was going out to get drinks. I would say I'm following the very heart of that intention. Sure, Baxter. You raised your hands in surrender. Your nose crinkled as you laughed again. You totally got me there. You weren't entirely sure if you were going to order anything yet. It was a deliberation you had with yourself while Baxter took a break. Luckily for you, the cafe's layout was open enough that you could observe the glass cases at the front from the comfort of your seat. You passed the time comparing what was printed on the menu to the real-life displays. Soon enough, the waitress was on her way back to your table. She passed out the two waters and then placed a white cup filled with richly colored coffee in front of Baxter and a hot chocolate by you. Are either of you ready to order? I'm taken care of, thank you. I like some food. I like a pastry. There was no way you could resist. The treats by the front of the cafe looked too good to pass up. The waitress smiled attentively and readied her pen. I'm all ears. I'd like a croissant, a piece of coffee cake, a muffin, banana bread, Danish, cinnamon, maybe a cinnamon roll, maybe a cookie, a piece of cake, a piece of pie, a cup of bread pudding, a bear claw. I don't know. I see bear. I gotta remember what a bear claw is. Bear claw, pastry. Like, what I'm getting for bear claw is different than what I'm seeing. Oh, a fritter? You know what? Yeah, I'll have me a fritter. Give me that fritter. Great choice. That sounds really yummy. I'll get these menus out of your way then, and I'll be back soon with your order. Hot chocolate and me a fritter. Love that. Love me a good fritter. She scooped up the menus and walked away, dropping them off at the front stand before disappearing into the kitchen. Baxter shifted his attention to you. I'm pleased you're getting something to enjoy. After a long, wide yawn forcefully derailed Baxter's train of thought, he politely tried to shield you from the image of by covering his mouth. Once he wrangled himself back into control, Baxter flashed you a grin, though it quickly lost its playful oomph as his eyes remained extra lidded. He had something in mind, but also seemed fairly content to simply gaze at you languidly. Baxter lifted his coffee and pressed the edge of the cup to his lips. He took a slow sip before putting it down. Baxter propped an arm against the table so he could hold his chin up. Normally that would have been a casual gesture, but anyone watching could tell that he desperately needed that extra help keeping his head upright. Before food arrives and steals all your attention away, would it be fine to ask a question? Oh, sure, ask away. What exactly is the event you have on the horizon? It's nothing crazy. I'm going to see my aunt and uncle. Actually, do you remember my cousin Lee? She invited us on the boat trip? I certainly recall. She had a bright personality. Yeah, it's her parents. Too bad Lee won't be there this time. She's busy. That. His response was cut off by another yawn, and that morphed into a wince. Baxter tried to smooth things with a sweet smile. I promise that was not me being bored. He blinked and was hilariously obvious that his eyelids didn't easily unstick. You bit down inside your cheek and tried not to laugh. It's all right, you're tired. Exactly. Please continue. Yeah. Out of my aunts and uncles, it was my uncle who I'm directly related to. He's my mom's younger brother. We all get along. That's the part of my extended family we're closest with. Well, in terms of location. Laughing, you scratched the back of your head while you explained. Baxter nodded along, focusing on the sound of your voice. His smile softened as you grew more animated, speaking about your family. It's not that I don't also have a good relationship with everyone on my mom's side, but they mainly live in Hawaii, so it's a lot harder to go see them in person. My grandparents used to be in California when me and Liz were little, so they could help out, but that was temporary. And yeah, it's nice having family that we can see more often. Your voice trailed off with fond thoughts about your family, and then your eyes snapped wide open. All Baxter did was ask about your plans for the day, and somehow you'd ended up rambling about so much more. Oh no, I kind of went on the whole thing there. Nonsense, I enjoyed listening to everything you shared. Thank you for telling me about your family. It was lovely to hear about them. Oh, you're welcome. The waitress returned with your order. She placed it carefully on the table. Enjoy! Thank you. You didn't waste a single second and gave it a taste. It was good. Since you had basically covered everything about what you were doing later, you didn't need to juggle thinking, talking, and eating, just as Baxter intended. It was nice to preoccupy yourself with this treat. Baxter, meanwhile, only had his coffee and was acutely aware of that difference. Baxter pinched the inside of his lip between his teeth while he tried to search through his foggy thoughts for something to say. He wanted to be good company, but he wasn't sure how to accomplish that. Ah, I know. How about I tell you what happened when I was on my trip? That'd be cool. Let's hear it. Then Baxter sat up straighter in his chair and considered how he wanted to begin the story. He focused his mindset momentarily, overcome the tiredness that clung to him. As you know, I traveled to Northern California, and it was a monumental drive. Several hours of me, myself, and the road. That car was wonderful. It got me there and here again without a single issue, when it had every reason to rebel against all the potholes I accidentally hit. Not him hitting potholes, brother. Baxter paused on that note and took a drink of his coffee. He placed the cup down on the table and winced. It's somewhat silly now that I'm vocalizing it, but I feel a tinge of guilt for all the miles I've managed to put on that vehicle over the course of this vacation. Sighing deeply, Baxter wore a wistful look. You understood the magnitude of this trip. Hopefully his mysterious acquaintance was a laid-back type. On a brighter note, the drive was even more scenic than I imagined. It was a shame I couldn't snap a single picture. Still, I'm grateful that I was able to leisurely travel across the state while I was there. I bet. And all that fuss to see some old family friends. Believe it or not, they're actually people my parents have known since well before I was even born. Wow. Wow, indeed. If I can even imagine someone from that many years. Though, between you and me, I don't have much of a relationship with them myself. Really? But you went out of your way to see them? I know they've always been fond of me, almost as if I was their own nephew. They're more than happy to open their door to me, given the chance. This might surprise you, or perhaps not, but I managed to get along famously with the older set. So it was only polite to make a social call while I was in the relative area, and there was plenty to catch up on and discuss while I was there. We even happened to catch some fantastic shows. It's nice you enjoyed the trip with your trip. Baxter's nose crunched as he chuckled. He took another quick sip of his drink. I can't agree more. The two of you continued to chat about upcoming plans while finishing your drinks, also in between several more extended and defiant yawns from Baxter. Eventually he glanced towards the window and his brow pinched. He didn't say anything on his own, so you asked, What's wrong? I'm worried that I might be keeping you too long from your other plans. It's not too late yet. I don't want there to be a yet. Your family's important. Do you want to get going then? Yes, that would be for the best. He turned in his seat when he caught where the waitress had gone. Baxter waved and she returned a minute later. Could we please have the check? He appreciated the gesture to cover it. I'm going to appreciate the gesture. It'll be one ticket. You've got it. I'll get that for you right away. As soon as the waitress was out of sight, Baxter let out another yawn, but it morphed into a frustrated groan. I'm getting fairly sick of that. His tone didn't sugarcoat a single feeling. Patting Baxter crossed his arms and tightly shut his eyes. It's a sucky experience when you're that exhausted. Baxter only murmured and roughly rubbed his sides of his face. His frustration manifested visibly as a grimace. I can distinctly feel my own eyeballs in my skull due to the strain. Aw, poor baby. I need to get you some medicine. Get some Tylenol. His hand dropped into the table and the glasses rattled softly. That only made his mood worsen. I hate that. I shouldn't have to be so aware of my own presence in this body. I have some questions. Are you okay? Oh no, you snorted. Sorry, Baxter, you patted him on the shoulder. That's the worst. You shook your head and sighed. That's the worst, buddy. It really is, isn't it? But I shall live through it. The waitress approached once more with a small black folder and placed it on the center of the table. Can I clear any of this away for you? No rush if you're not ready. Girl, it's 2 cups and a plate. Clear it if you need to. Please, take it all. We're about to leave. Like, yeah, we already got the check. Do your job, girlfriend. The waitress got right to work gathering the cups. Baxter, meanwhile, picked up the folder and opened it. After a few moments, the server was off again, and Baxter peeked at you over the top of the folder. Thank you, Princeton. I do appreciate you making time for me at the very last minute, especially on a day when you were already so busy. Thanks for inviting me. Oh, of course, it's always a treat to see you. Baxter's half-lit gaze lingered contentedly while he reached in his pocket. And then those tired eyes snapped open. He reached the alertness he'd been stringing for in an instant. My wallet! He stared at you helplessly. Baxter was sober and extremely aware of the reality he found himself in. I cannot. Not him forgetting his wallet. That happened at the grocery store with me and Gil. And we had to put stuff back. Because I didn't have that much money. So I paid for, like, what I could pay for. And it was so sad. It was so sad. I didn't bring my wallet. When I got dressed, I do not recall to take my wallet off the nightstand. Oh, that's fine. It's fine. I'm not surprised considering how hectic things are. Damn, I hate it when that happens. That means this will be my treat. You shrugged. It's fine. Maybe it's a good thing it's at home. It's better than forgetting it here at the restaurant, which might have happened instead. It was intended to be a reassuring thought, but Baxter didn't respond. His expression remained frozen in horror. Oh no. Understandably, Baxter was mortified. He threaded his fingers through his hair. I'll quickly run back and get it and return. Then I'd have to abandon you here, and that's not any better. Perhaps they might take an electronic payment I could send through my phone. All you got was a black coffee I can cover for you. The corner of his mouth twitched, and you read that as a sign that he'd at least heard you. Though he supposed it was only because he had reached a dead end in his own abilities to solve this problem. Baxter pressed his palm against his eyes and his fingers curled tightly. He released a slow, shaky breath. Oh, this poor baby. He reached out only to freeze halfway across the table. From his tense body language, he was trying with great difficulty to keep himself from getting truly upset. You shouldn't push him. You weren't sure how to help or what to do. You could only watch. He exhaled deeply once more, and this time he lowered his hands, folding them neatly on the table. I would appreciate that greatly. He couldn't quite look at you while he spoke, though the forced politeness in his tone reached you completely. Yeah, don't worry about it. You collected the check and he dropped in his panic and slid your card into it. When the waitress swung by, you handed it over. There was no trouble to be found at this table. Thanks a bunch, just 1 minute. She walked off, and you shifted your attention to Baxter. In this brief period, his shoulders had lost their defeated slump, and he sat stiffly upright instead. He studied your reaction with a delicate smile. Please don't misunderstand. I'm entirely fine. The issue is with my behavior towards you. You don't need to force yourself to make me feel better. It was all my mistake. His lips pressed into a fine line, and it was crystal clear that he was preemptively stopping you from further okaying the situation. Your gaze dropped to the tabletop, and the awkwardness was too stifling to do anything else. The way Baxter was beating himself up for perfectly normal missteps was horrible. You didn't like it at all. There was a reason why people called these kinds of situations accidents, because there was no manipulative or malicious intent. His only crime today was being human and sleepy. It would have been great to remind him of all of that, but Baxter was far too irked to hear any of it. He wanted to move on, so you bookmarked things there. The day wrapped up in a haste. Waitress returned your card and wished you a wonderful day. Then you left. Oh no. Did I make the wrong choice? Baxter managed to muster up a few things to discuss on the car ride home, but the conversation was distant and disjointed from how you both normally clicked. You made it home safely, though not before a silence had time to form. The slamming of his door to exit the vehicle was the first you heard from Baxter in a while. The two of you stood there on the street face to face, but the awkwardness from the cafe had come along for the ride, and it lingered forebodingly. There wasn't something you wanted to continue between you and him. Neither of you made a move to leave, a promising sign that he was struggling with the same thought. Baxter began sliding his fingers through his hair, then he paused mid-motion and dug his nails into his scalp. His controlled expression strained. Princeton, this is all my fault. I'd only forgot my wallet, but I made things increasingly worse by acting immature about it, undoubtedly making you uncomfortable. It may be hard to believe at this point, but I often can deal with unexpected issues as a reasonable adult. Today stung a little more than usual. I'm big enough to admit that. It certainly did not help at all that this was coming on the heels of already disastrous first impression. I had been hopeful that I could fix the overall impression by the end. Needless to say, I didn't succeed, and I completely understand if you're doubting the merit of a relationship with me at this point. I presented myself terribly to you. What a mortifying first date to go through. Hold on, this is our second date. What do you mean? However, if you're willing to, I would like to ask for a second chance. I can take you out again for drinks tomorrow, or rather, on any night you have free. I promise the next one will be better. A dusting of a blush rose to his cheeks before he barreled through everything he needed to say before he could get a single word in. Finally, Baxter paused to breathe. You blinked, trying to absorb the magnitude of everything he said. Now that he laid all his cards on the table, there was nothing left to do but anxiously wait. Above all else, he wedged open a space for you two to talk, and that was a relief. There was nothing terrible about what you did. Don't feel bad about that. You don't have to try so hard to impress me. I had a great time today. I'd love to go out with you again. You nodded understandingly. You don't have to try so hard to impress me. Believe it or not, but I enjoy hanging out with you, even if you're not ideally graceful at every step. I know it wasn't your plan for anything bad or embarrassing to happen, but that's why they're accidents. They wouldn't make me stop talking to you. Ah, you're far too kind. But I will need some clarification if that's a yes or a no for a second round. Yes, Baxter, I will get drinks with you. His gaze was gentle, if only for a single look. Baxter swiftly resumed his usual grin and confidence. I'll be in touch later with a specific time then, and potentially a suggestion for what you might want to wear. Have a lovely rest of your day with your family. Tell your mother and sister I said hello. I will. Excellent. See you again soon. He waved goodbye and earnestly seemed to be in a much better mood than only a few minutes ago. He waved too, even though his turned back couldn't see. Bye. He steadily walked home, and once he was safely in sight, you couldn't hold your frown in any longer. All morning, Baxter acted as if he had to be the one who needed to earn approval. To him, you weren't individuals getting to know each other. He was an outsider who had to jump through hoops to be excluded. That was the impression you'd gotten. It was more than upsetting. Maybe he took it hard because he was so tired. That felt like wishful thinking, but you thought so anyway. It was possible Baxter would be more comfortable after he rested. And if he wasn't, then you hoped that he would allow you to show him that your company didn't have to be like that. The rest of the day was focused on your family, and overall it was a great one. It was nice spending an afternoon with your aunt, uncle, moms, and Liz. And you remembered to tell them Baxter said hi. You were halfway asleep when you finally made it home and collapsed onto your bed. Soon morning had come again. That afternoon that followed moved strangely fast and slow because you knew there was another date at the end of it. Exactly as he promised, you received a text with the set hour to meet him at his condo. Baxter informed you this was going to be late when you would be leaving, so he recommended that you have dinner as usual. Apparently, this place did not serve meals, only drinks and appetizers. Interesting. Along with that, Baxter made the eyebrow-raising suggestion that you should wear formal attire. Even more interesting. He included an assurance that he'd be prepared when you were ready to leave. During dinner, you mentioned that you were going out for drinks with Baxter later. Your mamas were still commenting on your plans when you left to get ready. Even a few teasing remarks over the dress code floated upstairs with you. You opened the drawer, your mind was made up. You'd wear something formal, grandly formal. Well, if it's just drinks and appetizers, it's maybe grandly formal. He said formal. We'll do formal. It was off-putting on some of your nicer things. We had no clue what you were even dressing up for. But there was also something exciting about having that mystery, too. Looking at yourself in the mirror, you admired the sophisticated person staring back. It wasn't often that you did this. Slowly but surely, you were figuring out this growing up thing. There were a few minutes left before you had to leave, so you made sure that you had everything you might need while you were out. You ran through You ran through the essentials: phone, house keys, money, ID. As bad as you felt for Baxter, you didn't want to run into a similar problem of forgetting something important. It was a good reminder for both of you to be careful. Once you knew it was all there, you went downstairs and waved to your moms on the way out of the house. Your goodbyes and well wishes reached you as you all locked up. As you locked up, you didn't all lock up. You walked down the street and arrived at Baxter's house. Quite literally, seconds after ringing the doorbell, you heard the battle of doorknob turning. Oh, he's in a whole suit. The door casually opened, not so fast, not too slow. And there on the threshold was Baxter, though this time he wasn't in pajamas, but instead a full suit that was naturally also black and white. Hello, thank you for coming. You took a deep breath. So much for looking the part. Honestly, you intended to dress properly, but Baxter was in another stratosphere in comparison. The suit was probably tailor-made. You were fantastic, Princeton. I can't tell you enough how delighted I am that you're accompanying me tonight. You're sure? Absolutely. You'll be one of the best-dressed attendees there. Thank you. The suit looks very good on you, and it suits you. So you brought a full suit for your summer vacation? That's a good question. I'm not going to ask that, but that's a great question. I kind of hope you'd be in pajamas again. You waved at him in a greeting. You know what? I'm going to tease him. His mouth twitched as if he wasn't sure if he wanted to laugh or scowl more. You chose for him to be snickering. Well, Baxter readjusted his sleeves and smoothed the front of his jacket. He regained his usual composure. I'm sorry to fall short of your expectations, Princeton. Hopefully, that will be the only one of the night. Now that you'd gotten a good eyeful, you could discern that Baxter was truly himself. The exhaustion and the embarrassment from yesterday's morning adventure was entirely removed from his features. How have you been? You're definitely a night owl. It's nice to see you got some rest. You were glad but silently so worried about what happened before. You quietly smiled in relief. I'm gonna smile in relief. Baxter offered a matching one in return. You wondered if tonight's outing resembled more of what he originally intended the other night on your doorstep before it all truly started. Shall we go? This isn't something we'd want to be late for. Lead the way. And so, you both climbed to his car and were off. Are we going to see a show? Is that why he's saying it only serves appetizers? Baxter drove you out of the neighborhood. Your attention lingered on the starry sky for a moment, able to see a good view of the moon until he took a lazy turn. When you turned back to Baxter, his expression said little. He offered no obvious hints about your destination. The only thing you could count on was the place would serve some form of liquid. Probably. What are we doing? Well... He diligently stared at the road, not yet out of the residential streets of Sunset Bird. You caught a glimpse of his excitement as he continued talking. If you recall, I mentioned how we saw some shows while on my trip within a trip. You could call that inspiration. Once you graciously accepted my invitation, I began the endeavor to search for a particular performance we could see together. I had high hopes for what I could manage, even with such a short notice, and happily I doubt you should be disappointed. He let his words settle, drumming up anticipation. Coincidentally, the car rolled to a stop at a light. He turned to you with a proud grin. I'm going to run an ad. It's 3 minutes, and we'll be right back after the ad. Thank you for sitting through it. And we're back. He let his words settle, drumming up anticipation. Coincidentally, the car rolled to a stop at a light. He turned to you with a proud grin. Tonight, we'll be seeing a live show featuring comedy of error styles romance. What does that mean, Baxter? His foot pressed on the gas and he turned on the main road. A show? It wasn't anything you were expecting, but then again, it was Baxter. You were getting the impression he liked to surprise you. But wait, didn't you invite me for drinks? Does drinking a soda or something in a theater count as getting drinks? You understood that Baxter was striving for a mystery here, but still. I'm very pleased you asked. Baxter's smile grew. He had expected your reaction. Did I turn my thingy back on? I did. Okay. I just had to make sure. They do serve drinks, but an excellent selection from what I found, and it will only be drinks. There's no food on the menu. He shrugged his shoulders, not particularly finding that to be a loss. You were glad you weren't hungry. However, as promised, the drinks are crucial to the experience. You see, it isn't as at some grand arena. You find tonight's entertainment is as a spectacularly immersive setting of a jazz bar. All patrons will witness the story unfold in that very room. His voice lowered, theatrically so, fitting for a topic of conversation. Also, if you'd like, it's possible for the actors to interact with you directly. That's crazy, bro. Oh, that sounds social. I love this answer. Oh, cool. Seriously, that's amazing. Oh, cool. But that one about sounding social, very me. Very me. What a different way to spend an evening. You rolled the idea around in your mind. It sounded like fun. Baxter excelled and lost some tension in his shoulders. Yes, I know it'll be quite a unique experience, so I was hoping that you'd be open to it. I'm sure it'll be great. While you probably weren't looking forward to it as much as Baxter was, you were content with his choice of venue. Baxter drove into the heart of the city, passing by twinkling lights of the urban night until he pulled into a public parking lot. He switched his phone's map app to walking mode. It's an 8-minute stroll from here. 8 minutes in formal wear, sir? You shrugged, not needing to point out that the walking tended to be your main form of transportation anyways. Both of you exited the car, and Baxter made a note of where exactly he was leaving it. Luckily, the lot was well lit and located in a busy area. It'd be hard to miss. He led you across the road and followed the sidewalk until his phone proclaimed that you had reached the correct building. Baxter got the door for you. Thanks. Of course. Inside, he switched his phone off of the map, but continued tapping away at it. No, where is it? He huffed as he scrolled the screen. You could immediately tell when he found he was looking for from his reaction. He finally relaxed into his normal state of friendly nonchalance. Curious, you poked your head closer to read what it was. It had made sense when you saw it was digital confirmation for his purchase tickets. In front of you was a small line where a man would check tickets before waving people onward. Baxter slipped into the back, and you waited until it'd be needed. I'm glad we arrived on time. Missing the show was likely the chance of this evening going awry. We'd make it work even if we were late. The other guests in line were dressed to the nines. Some were even in vintage clothes. Baxter's previous advice was correct. The wait wasn't too long. After chatting with Baxter for a moment, it was his turn to show his digital tickets. I wish I would have did the grand clothing now. The usher was young, probably only a few years older than you. The bags around his eyes spoke to the fact that there was nowhere near the start of his day. These are for you and your friend, right? You nodded and took a step next to Baxter, making clear that you were here together. Cool. Thanks for coming in. We are thankful for you having us. Baxter shoved his phone into his pocket for a good once he got approval. He inspected the two of you and tilted his head to the side. Here are some ground rules before you enter the show. Everyone gets them. He began explaining the guidelines, a succinct list of that he'd obviously said hundreds of times before. For the most part, the rules wanted you to act as a polite human being. You could do that. Last, if you will not actually participate in the show, you can take one of these necklaces. Pointing out the box full of glowing jewel necklaces. Each was gaudy enough that anyone wearing one would be noticeable in the crowd. Wearing one of these beauties means that you're part of the same world as the actors are. No necklace, no participation. The actors will treat you like an invisible audience member. You can still speak out if you're suddenly inspired, but nobody's going to put focus directly on you. So, any takers? It would be my pleasure. Oh? Baxter volunteered immediately, and the usher fished a necklace from the box. I mean, if he's gonna do one too, I'd like one too. I mean, if he's gonna do it, I'll do it with him. Usher pulled out a second necklace and handed them out with an encouraging expression. Enjoy the show. You were waved off and allowed to enter the showroom past heavy double doors. The showroom was a sight to behold. From floor to ceiling it was lit up, yet none of that was bright enough to be blinding. The bar was full of expensive bottles and gilded engravings. The back was a pit for musicians large enough for a full band to play. Instruments were already set up. You were taken to the bar and seated at the two empty stools on the end. The booths along the walls were already filled with groups of other guests, laughing and clinking glasses. They had a full house. It was a popular event, maybe bigger deal than what Baxter had presented it as. The ages varied. Some of the crowd was made up of freshly faced 20-somethings, while others were silver-haired elders. You may have been the youngest in the room. And almost everyone was dressed up. Sequined dresses, fitted suits, and expensive jewelry as far as the eye could see. No broad generalizations to be made about the kind of people who would watch a show at a jazz club, other than most of them knew how to dress. The few exceptions of casual clothes stuck out between all the elaborate, coiffed, I'm going to say coiffed guests. The second usher bowed and left you alone, just for the bartender to appear out of nowhere and pick right up where they left off. He passed each of you a drink menu, smooth and practiced. Nice to see you tonight. Let me know when you're ready to order. Oh, that was the bartender. Nice to see you tonight. Let me know when you're ready to order. Of course. The bartender inclined his head cordially and then busied himself with polishing a glass with a white cloth. The jazz bar took the immersion seriously. Even the guy serving drinks had the proper aesthetic for the world this show took place in. He wore subtle eyeliner, and there was something about how he carried himself that made him seem like he'd wandered off a movie set, especially with the highly coordinated, shabby clothes for a uniform. You shared a look with Baxter before examining the menu. Where's his necklace? I want to see it. From first glance, it was impressive. In total, it held 5 pages of drinks, each with detailed descriptions, and some had photos. You turned to the last section entirely for non-alcoholic drinks. You wrote the blurbs, enjoying both the descriptiveness and the sense of humor. A few minutes later, a waiter in a full suit turned up. His tie was a muted maroon, and the only thing separating him from the clients was his pad for taking orders. You wondered why he approached you rather than leaving you to the bartender. Maybe because it was so busy? Welcome to our show. Can I get you anything, or do you need some more time? Baxter leaned forward in his chair, no hesitation. I would like a baby Bellini, please. Baxter passed the menu back. The waiter took it with a polite nod, then turned to you. He glanced over your options with one final read-through and then said you would like I would love a sparkling cider. I don't need to look at anything else, but we will. I'm looking. All of these sound gross. Give me a sparkling cider, babe. You handed your menu over, and the waiter put it with Baxter's. He inclined his head politely one more time. Thank you, esteemed guests. I'll return shortly. The waiter sauntered off and vanished through a side door away from the bar. Baxter's foot tips? What? Where did I get foot tips from? Baxter's fingertips tapped the counter rhythmically. The soft sounds faded into a din around you. You met your inquisitive glance with confidence. I knew what I wanted as soon as I saw the name. I firmly appreciate sparkling drinks, as well as peaches. As he, with a wicked smirk, his voice lowered into a husky rumble. I would prefer it without the baby, however. Same here, Baxter, you shouldn't say that. What? You don't need to tell me that. You snicker, you roll your eyes. Okay. It's only the truth. In the distance, the musicians filtered onto the stage from backstage. Oh, it's implying that he drinks. Okay, alcoholic. The sounds of tuning strings over the soundscape as they prepare for the big event. The action approaches. There were still a few minutes before he thought the production was scheduled to start. The air was full of anticipation, but still relaxed. The two of you chatted over your respective jazz music experience until the waiter arrived with the drinks. The waiter carried a silver platter with stiff formality. He passed out the glasses, not even leaving fingerprints due to the white gloves. Curiously, neither drink had been filled at the bar you were sitting at. You place your sparkling cider on the counter in front of you before setting down Baxter's baby Bellini. Thanks. Thank you so much. Gently, Baxter lifted his drink to his lips and sipped at the fruity beverage. He appeared as the very picture of sophistication with a stem glass in hand and a distant, unreachable gaze. Sitting there with him, everything suddenly hit you. His formal clothes, his fancy drink, the glamorous setting, and his dazzling smile all came together. He had pulled out all the stops for this adventure. It felt like whiplash compared to what happened with that far simpler, much more normal cafe date. It had to be intentional. You were certain that the sparkling glimpse was his goal. He practically said it out loud with his original invitation. You were never going to underestimate him whenever he got an opportunity to prepare. You picked up your own drink and sampled the refreshment. It was delicious and had a pleasant consistency. I would hope so. I would hope my sparkling cider had a consistency that was pleasant. After a flicker of the lights and an electric moment of silence, you heard the sounds of a keyboard. The crowd hushed, waiting in bated breath, and the rest of the band kicked in. A saxophone cut into the song before being backed by a chorus of trumpets. A bass player strummed along with the drummer, while the drummer kept the time. Everyone around you straightened on the lookout for something. Nobody was sure what, but they'd know when they saw it. The double doors at the front opened, and all eyes were on the pair as they entered. The leader strolled in with her heels clicking against the glowing walkway. Her form-fitting evening gown sparkled in the day's dazzling lights. She strutted to the center of the room, a grimace on her red-painted lips. Behind her, another actor casually followed. They easily could have been passed over, especially with many of the guests around them dressed far more formally. This character was plain in appearance, especially compared to the glitter of the other. They took quicker steps and reaching out. Both of the characters came to an abrupt stop at the center of the room. The glamorous one spoke loudly, letting her words carry over the band. My darling friend, you know I don't have time for this. I have to prepare for the show and must rest my voice. How else will I manage to sing? The singer sidestepped away from her friend, grating the space between them. I do not want to discuss this. The friend shrunk away, but refused to back down. There was a fight in the way they stood. The singer sighed. She crossed her arms, her frustration towards the topic making her next words bitter. It is more than enough that my parents and his parents keep bothering me. You don't need to add to that number, my dear. I can't leave it alone, now when you're making such a mistake. Ooh, what's the mistake? The singer put her hand up, dismissing her friend. Her movements were as sharp as her stilettos. Ooh. I repeat, I don't have time for this. I'm going to my dressing room. She swept across the room and then glanced your direction before quickly looking away. She exited through a door near the band. You were struck by her last expression. Was that sorrow? Longing? Either way, you had gathered the situation. The two were acquainted and the diva was a performer at the venue. Her friend wasn't. They had come to offer unwanted but likely needed assistance. Music slowed down, suddenly somber after the frenetic energy of the singer's outburst. Her friend hadn't moved. They hugged their arms around themselves and slumped in defeat. You were so focused on them that when the voice came from behind, you almost fell out of your stool. It's like talking to a brick wall, isn't it? You craned your head over the bartender. He was the same man who had passed you the drink menu. He was still at work polishing a glass. He was part of the bit all along. That probably wasn't even a real bar. Yet again, their commitment to realism surprised you. The friend took a deep breath before rushing over to the counter. Now that they were closer, you could tell their clenched hands were shaking. They directed a scowl at the bartender in full force. You need to talk to her. Unlike when they had spoken to the singer, those words were bitten out. They weren't as close to the bartender and not willing to allow him to see same niceties afforded to their friend. The bartender scoffed in their face. He wasn't any fonder of them, but he was trying to retain an ounce of professional decorum. Why would I? I've got no attachment to that lady. None of the crowd was buying it. You heard unconvinced snorts throughout the room. And she acted like I wasn't even here. Besides, she wants the stage and that's all. And that's it. All I'm good for is watching her, same as everyone else in the world. He gripped the glass tightly. You could faintly hear the polishing cloth squeak against it. She's not interested in my words, just as she told you. There's no time for that. The friend objected harshly, pointing a finger into the bartender's face. They weren't letting him get away with such a falsehood. She can't admit it because you won't admit it. You're making me laugh, kid. The only folks who want us together are you and our parents. He shooed the friend away by flinging his hand through the air. He had the audience captivated, half of them flinching from the gesture. I'm working. Don't block the bar. Her friend tossed their hair at him before they skulked away. They waved at a booth of necklace-wearing guests, then slid onto the edge of the cushion. They rolled their eyes and the entire head along with it, intentionally exaggerating, and their new table mate snickered. I don't know how I put up with either of them. We were starting to get the feel of the show. All the actors' behaviors were turned up to 11 for the sake of comedy, and the heart of the story was clear. The singer's venue and the bartender... The singer's venue? The venue's singer and its bartender were in love, but wouldn't admit it due to outside pressure and fear that the other didn't feel the same. A clattering sound brought your attention back to the bartender. He put the glass he had been polishing away. With his free hand, he idly glanced around for his next task. He settled on you and Baxter. His gaze dropped to your necklaces, and he gave a professional smile. You were both in the story world. Can I get either of you anything? Refills? A new drink? On the house. Consider it an apology for all the ruckus. He leaned over the counter and nodded pointedly at the friend. They blocked their face with their hand and sunk into the booth, trying to escape the stare. One of the guests at their table happened to have a paper fan and held it out to them. They gratefully took it and hid behind it instead. The bartender shook his head. Fed up, Baxter meanwhile grinned. Ah, I see. This is a comedy improv show. That would be delightful. No, sorry. That would be delightful. I could use another baby Bellini. Of course, sir. Even while the picture of poise and polite manners, Baxter gave the air of being quite smug over the formal address. The bartender shifted closer to you. You can now smell his spiced cologne. And you? Let me think. Not wanting to hold up the show for long, you asked the bartender for... I'm gonna have the sparkling cider, because sparkling cider is delicious. Got it. The bartender looked around the shelves of the fake bar but scratched his head. Oh darn, I'm missing something. I always told the owner he needs to keep this place better stocked. He grumbled a little more, earnest complaints. Not one to give up, he thought about his options. The crowd tittered with amusement as a friend peeked out with a flush of their cheeks from the other side of the room. If I'm right, there's some in the back. I'll return with your drink soon. Of course, there's no need to rush. I appreciate it. Baxter left his existing baby Bellini in the drama of a supervillain. With the trauma of a supervillain, what is wrong with this man? You wondered if he was being unaware or trying to put on a good show. The bartender threw his clean cloth over his shoulder and briskly abandoned his station. He disappeared through a curtained door beside the bar. You guessed that the real drink station was through there. You noticed the actual waiter bounced from table to table filling orders even during the performance. It made sense to keep the supply somewhere off stage so that the bar could keep pulling out drinks no matter what was happening with the story. Without the bartender, you and Baxter had to reorientate yourselves to where the action went. Most of the crowd's eyes were away from the tables. The friend character had scrambled out of the booth and paced along the length of the room. They were still troubled and stopped just short of biting their nails. Just as they clasped their hands together, the singer made her reappearance. Music swelled as she sashayed out of her dressing room once more at the center of attention. Her presence spellbound the crowd, instantly taking focus. Ah! The friend cautiously crept over to her, stepping around the tables between them. Feeling refreshed? Of course, darling. I'm a professional. Speaking of professionalism, why didn't you say hi to the bartender earlier? He is here, you know. The singer scoffed, echoing the same cadence the bartender had before. They were a perfect match of stubbornness. He doesn't like me. He made it very clear. He told his parents as much. He told my parents. She struck a defiant pose, sounding utterly disgusted. Who does that? What a cad! Her friend scratched the back of their head. Their face twisted comedically as they chose the words with care. Didn't you tell his parents that you didn't like him when they suggested it? I also recall when your parents accused you of being attached to him, you denied it, vehemently, with him in the room. The singer huffed, but didn't deny the events. She and the bartender's relationship was messy. And isn't it true that you do like our illustrious bartender? If your foolish parents hadn't meddled, you would be all over each other by now. Ha! The singer let out a deliberate, prideful laugh. It was dark and barely concealing very real hurt. Do not pretend. If he doesn't care for me, I don't care for him. She cast her gaze over the pockets of attendees gathered around her and spread her arms wide. I bet everyone in this room heard him badmouth me as soon as I left, didn't you? He said you were like a brick wall. He said he didn't like you. He said he doesn't think you like him. You know, along with her assessment. You shook your head, tried to show her she was wrong. You watched quietly. He said he thinks you don't like him. She snapped her fingers and pointed at you. The weight of the room's stares landed on your face. Good, because that's exactly right. The crowd laughed at that. She played them into a boisterous chatter. When the room finally settled and the singer had passed along a few more barbs about the bartender, the friend slung an arm around her. "Can't you please hear me out?" The singer groaned and shrugged out of her friend's embrace. She backed up with a frown. "I need a drink." She spun to face the bar before thinking better of it. Apparently she didn't need a drink that badly. "Not here, of course. I have standards." The sole of her shoe tapped on the floor. She needed action to deal with all the restless energy. "I believe this counts as an emergency. Please hold. I need to fetch my crisis bottle from my purse." She struck her nose high in the air and swanned off to her dressing room once more. Her friend stood alone in the center of the room. The decrescendo of the music made the room quiet. In the distance, a door slammed. The diva reached her room. Her abandoned friend visibly winced at the anger of the noise. They closed their eyes and mentally counted to 10. Slowly their stance unwound as they forced themselves to relax. They glanced furiously to the left and then to the right. "Okay." The last actors left spoke to the entire room, projecting their voice loudly. "While they're gone, does anyone have any ideas how to get these two to admit their actual feelings? It's been weeks of me putting up with their arguments. I'm sorry to say it, but I'm plumb out of ideas." People began shouting things out in a whisper amongst groups. The friend listened attentively as if one suggestion might hold the key to their very survival. Not all of the ideas were positive or even workable plans. "Just give up. I'm too stubborn for that. They aren't getting out of this that easily. Lock them in the bathroom together until they confess. I tried that last week. My friend knows how to pick the lock. Try making the bartender jealous. Set her up with someone else." "I'll do it." "Wait! Aha!" The friend spied a vase full of flowers on the table near the back. They scrambled to collect them into a bouquet. "These should work. The flowers could be given to our singer in celebration to her performance. She thinks they're from the bartender. Maybe." The new electric smile on their face contrasted the previous expression. For a moment, though, they faltered. "But I can't give these to her. She'll know immediately they weren't from the bartender. Would anyone be willing to help out? I know those two aren't giving the best impression, but when they're trying to prove each other wrong, they're very cute together." And they aren't trying to prove each other wrong. They searched through the crowd, brow furrowed. "Please." "I'll do it." Your voice rang through the room and someone started clapping. It was Baxter. That's my man. That's my man. I love me a man who's proud of me. "Thank you." They bounded towards you and placed the bouquet in your hands. Their sincere gratitude caught you by surprise. "You are a hero, I swear." Anyway, here's the plan. Although their tone was hushed, as you'd been sharing a secret, their pitch carried throughout the space. They were a talented actor, especially without any microphone to aid them. "I'll go get her. You need to call her over and pretend the bartender got those flowers for her, but was too shy to hand them over directly." "Count on me." Frank gave a thumbs up and scampered off to where the singer had left. Baxter inspected the flowers held in his hands. He approved of the bouquet. It made for a nice gift, circumstances aside. A familiar smirk appeared on his lips. He delicately stroked the petal with the back of his knuckle. His voice was low in your ear. "This is unlikely to work, but I do admire the friend's effort." You whispered your agreement. You laughed. You forced yourself not to laugh. "Oh, shush you snickered. "Shush, seriously," you insisted. You frowned at him. You laughed. "I'll laugh." You let out a peal of laughter, and the guests around you noticed and raised their eyebrows. "This shall truly be a comedy tonight." The door to the singer's dressing room swung open, and the friend pulled the singers back into the main room. Your arms were locked together, but the singer was dragging her very tall high heels all the way. In one manicured hand was a tiny bottle, no doubt the aforementioned emergency alcohol. It was already half gone. "It's not good to stay holed up by yourself all the time. You don't need to hide from everyone." "I'm not hiding. I'm simply very busy." Uh-huh. Since they weren't a fool, like the parents, the friend didn't buy that at all. Once the friend reached the center of the room, they released the singer. She rolled her shoulder back, so affronted by the rough treatment. "Showtime." "Hey, excuse me, I need to give you something." The singer snapped her head towards the bar and narrowed her focus down on you. Her dress swished as she approached. You held up the bouquet. Her suspicious acknowledgement gave you pause. "Where did these come from?" "The bartender left them for you." Miss Starlet gasped and pressed her hands to her chest. She squinted hard at the flowers as if it was a nest of snakes. She unscrewed the cap of her small bottle and tipped it between her pursed lips. She chugged the remaining liquid down. Got a huge laugh from the audience. She slammed her empty bottle down on the bar's counter and gasped for air with a frightening glare. But gently and slowly, ever so slowly, she reached out. Her fingertips touched a single flower's stem. She paused, then finished the movement and wrapped her digits around it. You stayed immobilized, as if she were a butterfly, and any movement would send her fluttering off. Without warning, there came a shout from the end of the bar. "Got your drinks right here!" Every head turned to see the bartender make his reappearance. A tray of drinks balanced on his right arm. Sorry for the wait, just had... He froze mid-sentence, staring at the scene he returned to witness. The singer standing next to you, being offered a bouquet, a single flower clutched in her hand. It was deathly quiet. You could have heard a pin drop. Even the band had stopped playing. Until... Ah! Suddenly the singer let out a mortified shriek. She flung the proffered flower and bolted, beating a frantic, desperate escape. She careened around the corner, and then... Slam! Deafening sound of a door being rammed shut. Another awful silence formed. Having remained frozen when the singer fled, the bartender's attention returned to where you and Baxter were at the bar. His eyes were drilling holes into you, his glare darting between your face and the remains of the bouquet, still in your grip. He caught you red-handed, literally, on account of the roses. It was unspeakably awkward. Even though your brain was screaming, "It's not real," you couldn't help but be swept up in the overwhelming sense of unease filling the room. Slowly the bartender marched over to the counter, his footsteps weighty and full of intent. He firmly set down the tray of drinks. The glasses rattled angrily, but not a drop was spilled. Then he cocked his hip and folded his muscular arms, striking a pose which felt almost threatening and bristled with suspicion. Well, now I see how it is. He flicked a finger up and down, sizing you up with it. So this blueberry-headed chump is who I'm losing to? Really? Now I'm calling me a blueberry-headed chump. It's the wrong shade of blue, sir. The rather silly epithet got a flared number of titters from the audience, but the bartender wasn't laughing. He made a bitter sound at the back of his throat and shook his head. He muttered angrily under his breath. I should have known. Wait! A cry came from the other side of the room. A mutual friend, face distraught, was bustling with their way over, limbs flapping with panic. I can explain. It's a misunderstanding. What I'm trying to say is... Stumbling over their words, the friend attempted to lay out the situation. The flowers were all part of a plan to get the singer to admit her own feelings. As the friend nervously rambled, you found yourself practically throwing the bouquet down on the counter in front of you like it was a hot potato, pulling it up your arms in a non-threatening gesture. At first, you weren't convinced it would work. The bartender's expression was thunderous as a summer rain cloud. His brows were set in a 90-degree angle, stern as steel. But as some of the other patrons began to chime in with words of confirmation, his dark countenance began to clear. A number of emotions melted into each other on his face. Anger became confusion became understanding, and understanding became acceptance. He let out a long, tired sigh and unfolded his arms. Okay, I hear ya. You were only trying to help. I'm sorry. He directed his apology at you. I shouldn't have gotten angry. There's nothing wrong with your hair. Don't worry. I saw you holding those flowers and lost my cool. He chuckled weakly. That's on me. I'm the problem here. At this, he hung his head and slouched where he stood. I can't believe she'd run away like that, screaming as if she'd seen a ghost, like I was the worst thing in the world. Is it really that awful to being around me? Am I really that bad? His voice was thick with emotion, pain behind every word. There was barely a dry eye in the whole building. A chorus of sympathy rose up from people around you, sounds of comfort and encouragement in equal measure. Saying the tender walked, I was not thinking bartender. Like, I know it's bartender, but I was thinking chicken tender. Because, like, the way it's just written. The tender. The tender walked behind this bar and came to rest his palms flat on the counter, his thick arms spread wide. I wish I knew what to do, you know? If there was something. Anything. It was a frank admission laden heavy with resignation. He bowed his head again and was silent. There was a pointed pause. Into it, you heard Baxter gently clear his throat. If you'll permit me to say, it can be hard to know what to do in these kinds of situations, but the important thing is that it's making you unhappy. Once you realize that, it should at least be obvious what not to continue doing. Dancing around your feelings like this will only lead further and further from what you want, so why stick to the same old tune? The bartender gradually lifted his face to peer up at Baxter with an inscrutable expression. If you like the charming singer, then what could you ever have to gain by insisting otherwise? You don't need to propose or anything equally drastic, but why push her away when all you want is to get closer? His voice gained a faint lilting cadence, almost like he was a singer too, before it tapered away to nothing. On the countertop, he saw the bartender clench a fist. Ha! You got me pegged! You and everyone else in this joint. So I like her already. What good is that? She thinks I'm a joke. She wouldn't be seen dead with someone like me. We all know that too. You saw what just happened. Am I supposed to make myself look like an idiot? Waltz over and tell her we should be pals? I'd be straight up begging to be laughed at. I don't. I couldn't take it. Not from her. My friend's right, you know. You're only making it worse. But what you're doing, you're already embarrassing yourself. It's always hard to put yourself out there, but isn't it better than the alternative? You stay silent but smile compassionately. You watch with bated breath, eager to see what happens next. It's always hard to put yourself out there. One hand came up to scratch the nape of his neck in a universal gesture of awkwardness. I guess you got a point there. I understand the concern. You need to go further than you're able. The key is that you step forward in the first place, or at least resist the urge to continue moving backwards. When that time comes, don't pull away. You'll only regret it later. The bartender rested one arm across the counter, easing into a stance that was more casual. He rubbed his chin thoughtfully. His body language was loosening up. You gathered that he was mulling over what had been said, taking it all in. After a short while, he cracked a cautious grin. You know, it's usually other people who want me to listen to their problems, and by listening, I mean I just pick them up. I just help them pick a poison, you know, blunt the edges when nothing else can. Never thought I'd be on the receiving end, though. He wrapped a knuckle on the countertop and straightened up suddenly. Ah, shoot, I forgot the ice with your drinks. I'm being real sloppy tonight, letting personal stuff get in the way of business. Sorry about that. He began to walk towards the heavy curtain, his black shoes echoing loudly on the floor. Let me go take care of that, and maybe cool myself off for a sec while I'm at it. With a click of his heels and a swish of the curtain, he was gone. Now what became the unspoken consensus of the audience? An answer came shortly. Psst! It was in the form of a loud hiss from the other side of the room, from behind the corner where the singer had vanished. Her focus went back to see the lady in question poking her head out, shy as a dormouse. She cupped her fingers around her mouth, keeping it to a stage whisper. Is he gone? Various dissenting voices chimed in. Baxter flashed her a quick thumbs up. Seeing that the coast was clear, the singer's head vanished for a brief instant before reappearing, the rest of her following along with it. She swung her way into the main area, oozing feigned confidence. All the terror of her departure had gone, and hastily pasted over as though nothing had happened. She brought up a hand to shade her eyes, casting a look around the room, her immaculately lipstick lips parted. Has my dear and delightful, meddlesome friend decided to finally beat it too? Not yet. The friend's voice called out from somewhere behind you. While everyone's attention had been elsewhere, they had managed to collect the discarded bouquet. In their other hand was the lone flower the singer herself pitched. They held it out to her. I'm sorry about the flowers. I lied. They weren't from him. They never were to begin with. The singer clapped over her mouth in shock. Okay. What? You tricked me? Her cry projected clear as a bell, ringing with hurt and betrayal. Her pristine face was crumpled in a furious scowl, directed first at the friend and then everyone else in the room. And you were all in on it? The friend darted to her side in an effort to placate, babbling apologies over and over with a mollifying tone. I know, I'm a terrible friend and I shouldn't have done it. Finally something we can agree on. Fine, I deserve that too, but just hear me out, okay? Even though they weren't from him, there's nothing stopping you from flipping this on its head. I'm not sure I like where this is going. I'm a singer, not an acrobat. It's easy. When he comes back, why don't you give the flowers to him? The singer stared blankly for a second, then crossed her head back and bellowed with laughter, her once lyrical voice now cold and callous and timber. Oh, my darling friend, you should really consider joining the circus. I've never heard something so ludicrous. This is serious. I just know it'll work. Believe me, I'll be rooting for you. And not only me. You all think so too, right, gang? At their prompting, the room was filled with shouts of agreement. Yeah! We'll be right behind you. It's okay. Don't be afraid. What have you got to lose? The comments came bright and fast. More people pitched in with remarks about what had happened while the singer was gone. Others simply nodded along. Though she'd readily dismissed her friend's suggestion, the audience's reaction seemed to be more convincing. She stood in the middle of the flurry of sound, heads cocked, listening intently. At that very moment, there was a shuffling from behind the curtain entrance. The fabric parted to reveal the bartender, carrying a palm-sized metal bowl piled high with ice. For the second time this evening, everyone froze in place. The singer slowly rotated on her heels to face him. His eyes were wide with surprise. Suddenly, she stumbled forward. The mutual friend had given her a nudge, knocking her off balance and toward the bartender. She wheeled around to glare at him before snatching the single flower her friend still held about facing once more. She laughed, a thin, nervous laugh, and took one small step closer. A wide expanse separated them. Her footfalls echoed. 1 step, 2 steps, then she halted, too afraid to continue. She wavered on the brink of turning back. All at once, the crowd made good on their promise. Hollers of encouragement came from the booths behind her, whoops and cheers and whistles of "Don't give up now!" "Woo! You can do it. Come on, girl, I believe in you." You applauded along with the crowd. You stayed quiet on the edge of your seat. "Come on, girl, I believe in you." Once again, the singer crept across the room as though expecting to be attacked at any moment. The bartender was a statue, watching motionless. Inch by inch, the distance closed. When only a few feet remained to separate them, the singer paused. She cast an anxious look from her target to where you and Baxter were sitting. At your side, Baxter smiled and inclined his head in a nod. You followed suit, giving her a cool thumbs up, nearly there. With the poised slowness of a puppet yanked on strings, she extended her arm. The flower gleamed in the dim light of the bar, a flush of red hanging in the air between them. The bloom was fragile, frail, vulnerable, like a naked, helpless heart offered up in prayer. Everyone in the room held their breath. The two held each other's gaze, neither speaking a word. He knew, and she knew. This time it was real. The bartender silently placed the bowl of ice down on the bar, a moment of choice, a crossroads. Then he walked over, stretched out his fingers. He caressed the petals of the single rose, light as a feather, and then he placed his fingers over hers and gently lifted the flower free. He had accepted. The response was immediate. The space exploded with applause, cries of delight coming from all and the sundry. The friend jumped up and down at the spot, suppressing a squeal. High fives were exchanged. There were wolf whistles and roars of approval. Baxter and you shared a look of silent satisfaction. Amid the jubilation, the bartender returned to the counter to retrieve the bowl of ice. Maybe it was a metaphor, the cold winter swap for the first blooms of spring. He hastened over to you, and dropped a handful of cold, possibly metaphors in yours and Baxter's glasses. He parted again with a wink. After the first climactic moment, the remainder of the story barreled ahead. No sooner had the lovers begun to open up to one another than further complications reared their heads. First came the parents, who had always claimed the two were fated. They were keen to seal the match and win the satisfaction of lording it over everyone. Nobody could bear the thought of granting them the satisfaction, and so began the elaborate schemes to keep the two families out of the loop. Tragedy devolved into farce. At every step, the audience had a part to play. One scene saw a group of patrons acting as a diversion, keeping one of the parents occupied while the lovers made their escape. In another, you and Baxter were recruited to slide secret notes along the bar while nobody was looking. When the band got to help, swapping one song in the program for another without warning, the singer's defiant aria transmuted into one of passionate, heartfelt longing. It was a flurry, the characters coming and going with a chaotic energy you normally could only see in a distance on a stage. And all through the carefully coordinated mayhem, the actual waiter diligently continued to cater to patrons, serving more drinks, clearing tables, and lighting candles. He ducked and weaved between chairs and bar stools and the other characters, sometimes even participating in the action, but normally fading into the background. At one point, the singer had almost collided and would have sent a particularly hefty tray flying, but it was all part of the performance, and they both expertly caught the glasses before they fell, to a loud approbation from the audience. There we go. The journey was precarious, full of twists and turns, but with everyone's help, the protagonists were finally able to face their feelings for each other. Hardly anyone could have resisted getting caught up in it. When the confession came at last, a deafening cheer went up. The two shared a kiss, and the room was plunged into darkness. The band struck up a lively tune, and when the lights came back on, all the actors took their bows to well-earned applause that seemed to last for hours. Finally, the floor cleared, the lamps dimmed, and to their usual twilight. It was finished. Love had triumphed, at least for one night. With the show over, things wound down for the evening. There was no more performances booked, although it was still until closing. People could enjoy the room as a normal bar. The band continued to play, and patrons milled about with their drinks. Some people were animatedly discussing the performance you'd just seen. The atmosphere was convivial. Baxter let out a contented sigh and fiddled absent-mindedly with his second baby Bellini. He'd barely touched it since it arrived. Seeing that you were aimlessly looking around, he caught your eye with a tilt of the head and a quirk of his brow. "Now then, was the show to your liking? I'm all ears, and you can be honest, it can be a lot to take in." "And at least I had the experience. Are you kidding? It was so fun. It was pretty interesting. It was really wonderful. I guess I'd seen worse shows before. You were at a loss. It was hard to process such a big event." "It was pretty interesting." "That's fair. It's not everyone's idea of entertainment. On the bright side, we spent an evening in good company, which is something I'm thankful for. It was nice of you to come." "You might be interested to know that shows aren't always like this. They have quite a wide selection of different genres. The murder mysteries are always popular, but I wasn't sure how you'd feel about an interactive performance with the capacity for violence. Those can get rather intense, to say the least. Even the play we just saw is rarely performed the same way twice. As far as I'd heard, they often chop and change the premise, shuffling the characters and events around as needed. You recall the ever-suffering friend, desperate to help the fated couple find love? Well, some nights, it is they who charms the heart of the singer, or the bartender. In that situation, the third party is instead refusing to help out of their kindness, not wanting to get in the way of their own possible romance. Sometimes the characters' families detest one another, Romeo and Juliet style. On those nights, the singer and the bartender dislike each other too, but pretend to fall in love in order to spite their own parents, and then, of course, it happens for real. And on rare occasions, they simply play hard to get, faking a quarrel for no reason other than to frustrate their would-be matchmakers and laugh at them with the guests in private. So you see an enormous potential for telling a whole host of different stories, but usually the core idea is the same. The two characters, for whatever reason, are always past each other, always talking past each other, always failing to communicate. It's up to the audience to lend a hand. I think it's a fascinating concept, personally. A very novel form of entertainment. You listen to You listen attentively to Baxter's explanation. Regardless of what you thought of the performance, it was nice to hear him passionate about something. He spun from side to side on his bar stool, a dry smirk on his face. I suppose I find the fundamental concept rather amusing too. It's so obvious from the outside that the way the characters let their pride become an obstacle to their own happiness. As I said before, if they want each other so desperately, what point is there in saying the opposite? It's plainly not right to yourself and the one you care for. It's so unpalatable that it compels us and the supporting cast to action. Just right for the interactive theater, I suppose. Yeah, being honest with yourself is a choice, and so is being dishonest. People's feelings aren't always easy as that, though. Everyone has their own struggles. Are you saying you never pretended to be something you're not? Of course, Baxter couldn't understand the concept of being shy. You declined to comment, preferring to let the topic rest. Are you saying you never pretend to be something you're not? Baxter rocked idly back on his stool, giving the appearance of thought, but maybe merely acting mysterious. One hand stirred his drink. No comment. Eventually, a little voice in the back of your head prompted you to speak again. Thanks for tonight, for bringing me along. It was a nice date. It honestly surprised you that Baxter had been able to get seats at such short notice. It seemed like the place was pretty popular. The performance you'd watched had been a full house. Able to hide your curiosity, you put the question to the man himself. Where exactly did you get tickets for this? Instantly, Baxter's face tensed, his easygoing smile losing some of its effortlessness, and tugging down at the corners. Ah, that, of course. He crossed his arms in a way that struck you as mildly defensive. Maybe you remember the friend of my parents, the ones I visited recently. Well, it just so happens that they're in the performance business. Theater, ballet, musicals, all sorts kinds of productions. They specialize in large-scale events of that nature. This venue isn't one of theirs, but they were able to pull some strings on my behalf. It's a question of knowing the right people who know the right people. We could have even had full backstage access with the main cast if I had asked. As it was, we were singled out for some special attention during the show on account of being seated at the bar. I remember to thank them for that. You couldn't help it, your eyes widened a little. You hadn't figured that Baxter would have that kind of pull. Why wouldn't I figure that? This man is rich. Seeing your response, Baxter's features chilled further, his brows knitting together. He shrugged his shoulders in a sigh. I do not try to lean on that kind of thing too much, if you can believe me. I appreciate it might not look like it now. I don't believe you. I don't. Because you have a friend with connections that got you to be able to drive a rental car in California. And then you have connections to the entertainment industry. Look at you. Look at yourself, Baxter, and then tell me that you don't use your connections. Often. You could say it's a means for me to preserve my sense of independence. It's easy to be popular if you can foot the bill, and I don't want that to be what draws others to me. But after all that, here I am, leaning on the same old crutch. Nothing has changed since I was 6. How quaint, how wonderful, how truly excellent. As he rambled on, Baxter was speaking more and more inwardly, his tone increasingly acrid. Is this really any better than yesterday? What have I achieved? He could only sit and listen as the brief tirade continued. Had Baxter been sitting on this ever since the coffee shop? It was true he hadn't come across as satisfied by reassurances, only by a second chance. But if you had known it'd only make him feel worse, you wouldn't have to let it get this far. Baxter managed to snap out of his train of thought, his attention returning to you. He looked rather sheepish. I'm sorry, Princeton. Perhaps it should be best to call it a night. I wouldn't want to sour the evening after such a charming show. He swiftly arose from his bar stool, mind made up. You didn't stop him. Attempting the conversation in a public place wasn't a wise plan. Instead, you hurried to follow. Crossing the floor towards the exit, you pass the bartender and a few of the other cast members. You quickly expressed your appreciation to them and got cheery waves and thanks in return. Sounds and colors became a blur, and before long you had stepped out into the street. Baxter was already a few paces down the block heading for his car, but he stopped for you to catch up. He better had stopped for me to catch up. I hate when guys do that, when they just walk away. No. You're gonna wait for me. We're gonna walk together. You're not just gonna leave me some strange place. Baxter, this is strike 1, okay? You got 5 strikes. Usually just 3 strikes you're out, but you got 5 because I like you so much. We exchanged a few pleasantries on the journey home, but nothing too involved. Baxter was making an effort to keep the conversation light, just as he promised. He didn't want to leave a bad impression, that much was clear. He used the time and the space between sentences to mull things over. There was something that needed to be done, but you couldn't figure out what you could say. In your imagined scenarios, it would all end the same way, with him appreciating the sentiment while not believing. It was hard to think clearly. Your head was full of the smell of fake cocktails and snatches of remembered music, like the show and your life blending together in the shake of a mixer. You sank down into the soft leather of the car seat and let the images wash over you in waves. The stars were twinkling playfully overhead as you arrived back in your own neighborhood. The moon was a yellow lantern floating up high. You stepped out of Baxter's car and the sea breeze danced across your cheeks. After the summer heat of the daytime, it was cool and refreshing, like the first sharp sip of the iced drink. Braxter escorted you to the front door. He was, as ever, determined to be a gentleman. The deliberateness of it gave you pause, in a way that it hadn't until now. He lifted the corners of his mouth, and his eyes wrinkled, a perfectly arranged smile. "Good night, Princeton. I had a wonderful time." The manner of it had made it sound like he was expressing his feelings, and more like he was stating a want, as if he was determined that it should be true. Ever since his dip in mood at the end of the event, your mind had been filled with thoughts that you couldn't grasp hold of. Those questions pressed against you insistently. Why was he still beating himself over what happened yesterday? Why did he seem so unlike himself before you left the bar? What was going on in that head of his right now? Having bid you farewell, Baxter moved to leave. There was a priority in making himself scarce. In his eyes there was something like tiredness, something like fear. The prospect of some other sudden indignity rearing its head was too much for him to bear. He lost the chance to save face entirely in front of you by now. Best to cut things off at the roots. To see him like that tugged at your chest, you couldn't accept him going back to that empty house wallow in frustration, but what could you do? Your mouth opened without anything to fill it, but the words somehow came anyway. Would you want to come inside? Things couldn't end here, that much was certain. What you needed was more time. Baxter paused, having turned to go far side of him in the shadows. As he slowly swiveled back to you and the light caught his face once more, his expression was conflicted. It held surprise, confusion, and no small amount of intrigue. His lips parted as if to speak, but his brows furrowed and he closed his mouth again without a sound. He evidently had no idea where the present moment was leading, neither did you. Baxter settled for a simple tilt of the head, his eyes posing a question. "Well, no worries if not. I know it's getting late. But how about you come in and have a drink? It's been such a good night, I don't want it to be over so soon." Despite playing it off as nothing serious, you were silently willing Baxter not to go, just a little longer. Hearing your elaboration, Baxter couldn't help but be amused. He covered from his initial trepidation enough to laugh at your desperate plan. "A drink, you say? A fascinating suggestion. How decidedly original of you." One eyebrow was raised, his voice dripping with irony. He quietly chuckled in kind, happy that he'd played along with the absurdity of the suggestion. Baxter's features relaxed into a look of fond regard as his eyes searched your face for a moment. One hand was tucked casually into his back pocket. Though some of the tension appeared to be gone, his stance was still one of indecision, contemplation. For some reason, your imagination conjured up a vision of him at Woodland Crossroads, standing just as he was now, carefully weighing which way to go. At this point, you felt as though you could guess the thought process he was going through, even if he wasn't saying it out loud. For Baxter, it was all a question of the eventual outcome. When everything was over, and he looked back on this moment, how would he best like to remember it? Should he end things here and avoid any further mishaps, or should the night continue with the accompanying risk of additional regrets? Baxter didn't only aim to make the most of his time by doing what he liked, but he meticulously crafted the experiences and emotions he'd have. He sighed inwardly, recalling simpler times, if only it were another case of rich frozen desserts to pick from an ice cream truck. At length his mind was made up. Baxter cleared his throat and straightened his stance, facing you square on. Thank you for the offer, Princeton. It's very kind of you to be so generous with your time. I should like to take up that suggestion if it's no inconvenience. A drink would be lovely. A rush of relief hit. Thank goodness, you still had a choice. You still had a chance to turn things around. You likely had a similar thought, though your ideas on what would achieve that were certainly different. Flashing a cheerful smile, you unlocked your front door and led the way inside. Baxter dutifully followed, pausing only to wipe his shoes on the doormat, just as Ma would want. All the lights were on in the living room, and there was a brief flash of panic at the prospect that you'd lured Baxter into a run-in with your family at the worst possible time. As luck would have it, you had poked your head around the doorway. The room was empty. You couldn't hear movement. You were alone for now. So you gestured for Baxter to sit down and make himself comfortable. He graciously accepted the invitation. Rather than crouch on the couch, he sauntered over to the table and pulled up a chair, prim and proper to the last. Having got this far, you willed the hostly components of your brain into motion. After staying professional like the bartender at work, you had some standards to live up to. First things first, the technical reason why you'd invited him in. What do you want to drink? We have juice, milk, other things? Just water, please. I don't have the appetite for much else right now. His reply came without hesitation, but it lacked the usual degree of confidence. Confidence? Why'd I say it like that? You'd come to expect from him. The sound of it spoke volumes. While nobody could go as far as to call him fragile, there was no denying that Baxter was a long way from his usual bold self. Oh, you poor baby. Okay, water it is. Reach for a pair of glasses, deciding to stick with water yourself to keep things simple. After pouring some chilled water from the fridge, you brought the drinks over to the table and sat down across from Baxter. Oh, okay, you're welcome. Baxter sipped his water quietly, then placed it back down in front of him. It struck you fully how bizarre the situation would appear to anyone who happened to be watching. Two people sitting down at a dining room table, dressed to the nines, gingerly sampling glasses of plain water. You mentally whispered an apology to the tender of the jazz bar. You were a little ashamed of your feeble imitation of his skills. It was a good thing your moms weren't around to see this either. They'd never let you live it down. Not in a million years. Live what down? I'm so confused. What is there to live down? What is there to be embarrassed about? But that was all beside the point. You knew, and Baxter knew, that the pretext of coming over for a drink was simply that, a thinly veiled excuse. Only a very particular kind of emergency would it necessitate visiting a neighbor's house for nothing more than a glass of water. And yet, in a way, it had been an emergency, a relationship emergency. You sincerely hoped that this brief moment would give you both the chance to clear the air and reach some kind of mutual understanding. Baxter reached down to fiddle with the tumbler of water before him, though without lifting it to his lips again, he stared down into it searchingly. After a while, he spoke. I feel like I must sound like a broken record at this point, but it's exceedingly considerate of you to extend your hospitality this far. I am grateful. His gaze didn't lift, but one corner of his mouth did. It looked as though it took some effort. He maintained it just long enough to be sure you'd seen, and then dropped it like a heavyweight. He quietly sighed once, as though to catch his breath. He continued. I must confess, however, if it were up to me, none of this would be happening. I find myself regretting my actions up to this point. Things would have been for the better if I had not said anything after the show, or if you hadn't treated them as if they mattered. It was a brief moment of frustration, and it caused so much trouble, an evening ruined by nothing and for nothing. And this was already my second go at inviting you for an occasion. We don't need to retread what happened the first time. He tossed his head to one side and made a bitter sound with his tongue. I should be better than this. It irks me so much to make the same mistakes over and over. His voice trembled with frustration, his eyes dark and downcast. He dropped to a forceful whisper, repeating the words as if to convince himself of them, as if to nail them to his chest. And we're going to take a short break, because I also have to take a potty break. Bye. Well, not bye. See ya in a little bit. We got 30 minutes, leave me alone. I could have sworn I put this on mute. See what happens when you do stuff? Crazy work. Oh well. That is life. That is life. But we're back. It was a what? Where did I get it was? His voice trembled with frustration, his eyes dark with downcast. He dropped to a forceful whisper, repeating the words as if to convince himself of them, as if to nail them to his chest. I was better than this, wasn't I? Why do you feel you have to be? I think you're wonderful. You aren't better or worse, you're just yourself. You're acting like characters in the show, you know. I don't need you to do that, I just want you to talk to me. Baxter, you haven't done anything wrong. Why do you think you have to be? Baxter finally lifted his eyes to meet yours. They were narrow, their intention unreadable. The cruel curve to his mouth spoke for itself, however. With the jolt, you realized it was a look of poorly disguised mockery, and still you could tell it wasn't meant for you. When that cutting smile opened and the words came, pointed and pained and sharp, it was all aimed inward at himself. This whole situation, it's asinine. I haven't known you long enough to be causing this much kind of trouble. I'm quite literally a stranger. And I won't even be here long enough for that to change. As welcoming as you all are here, this can't be forgotten. This can't be forgotten, right? Yeah, this can't be forgotten. I was only ever supposed to be a part of the fun, a worthwhile piece of summer scenery, someone who added to the experience, not held it back. You shouldn't have to baby me, to sit here and spend your time making me feel better when I don't keep it together. His hands were clenched on the table, his knuckles a shock of white. The mess I am in the mornings, the drama I cause in the evenings, the person I am when the show is over, those aspects shouldn't be any of your concern. I don't provide that support to you, do I? How could I when I don't know you? No, it's not fair to make you worried or worse, guilty over what happens to me. What matters is that when we're together, it's for the pleasant parts of existence. The less ideal shades of life can be managed separately. He slumped back in his chair, the power of having gone out of his voice. That's all I wanted. Not him throwing a little fit. Sir, it's not that serious. It's not that serious. It never was that serious. We said it wasn't that serious, and you're making it so serious. You are a human man. You have mistakes, you make mistakes, you have accidents, you make accidents. Life is life. Calm down. It's not that serious. I see you as a human being. If you want me to see you differently, then tell me that. And I'll start seeing you differently, but it'll be fake. It'll be fake. The blow was still pounding in your ears. Witnessing Baxter like this, as you'd never seen him before, was equal parts exhilarating and shocking. The inner conflict now is exposed wire. How many times had you sat across from him these past few days? And how was it that only now it felt like you were truly seeing the person in the chair opposite? You took a moment to process your thoughts, setting your breath. Here at last was the crux of the matter. It was clear that when Baxter came to Sunset Bird, he had set himself a series of rules about how to involve himself, how much of an impact to make. Like the tourist concept of leave only footprints behind but taken to the extreme. It wasn't space for him to be complicated, to have negative emotions, to show different sides of himself to anyone. To do so would be a dereliction of duty. You weren't going to criticize him wanting his privacy. It was important to him and you respected that. But this kind of framing, one where he had an obligation to minimize himself for others' benefit, it was only causing pain. In spite of what he felt was right, you cared too much about him by now to let him carry on like this. Cautiously, you opened your mouth. Morning Baxter, evening Baxter, all the Baxters, I like you. It's too late, Baxter, you're not a stranger, you're my friend. No one cares if sometimes you have a bad day. I'll still want you around. Getting to know you better is what makes it all worthwhile. You deserve more than that. You have been there for me, and I can do that for you too. Getting to know you better is what makes it all worthwhile. You spoke earnestly and with as much composure as you could manage. Right now, more than anything else, Baxter needed to know how wrong he was. He wasn't a burden, his feelings didn't hurt you. You tried your best to communicate this to him. And then another thought made itself known to you. One that ached under your ribs. You couldn't help but give it voice. We finally met again after all these years. You haven't been nobody to me for a long time. You said your piece and went silent. The house lay still and the windows were empty portals, black with light. The only sound was that of both your breathing. Baxter's eyes had been locked with yours during this speech, the last heat of his frustration smoldering with them. Now in the quiet, you finally felt the embers fade completely. His gaze slowly slid to one side and then down. He swallowed. I. Sound drifted to you across the table, small and hushed, a sigh. Thank you. It was said simply, with no pretense or caveats. Baxter had given up the fight with himself for now and accepted what you had told him. You let your body unclench, and you watched the creases of Baxter's brow begin to disappear. A hand emerged from beneath the table to lift his glass, and he sipped the water, eyes closed. You took this as your cue that the discussion had run its course. There was no guarantee that things would change going forward. You weren't so arrogant as to think that Baxter's behavior would be altered all at once. Nothing drastic, anyway. He listened to your feelings, but who could really say how it would impact what happened in the future? The past couple of days had held up a mirror to Baxter, showing him a reflection that wounded him, cutting too close to the bone. There were hurts that ran deeper than he'd let you reach. It didn't mean he mistrusted you. It may not have been a matter of trust to begin with, but you hoped that with time, Baxter might come to count on the fact that there was at least one person out there who would accept him. You wanted to give him that. Another souvenir to remember you by. Minutes passed, and sip by sip, the two of you drank your way toward the bottoms of your water glasses. The silence couldn't be called effortlessly comfortable, but it wasn't awkward. Companionable, perhaps. Baxter sucked in the last drops from his cup, and then moved to stand unhurried. Thank you again. That was refreshing, both the water and the conversation. Still, I should be going. He was matter of fact with the air of calm finality. You weren't able to disagree. You nodded and rose in parallel, moving to take the glasses back over to the kitchen. You managed what you had set out to achieve. It was all right to let things end here for the time being. Night had spun around your way. Hopefully Baxter could see it as a positive when he reflected on it. You walked with him across the living room to the front door. With his back to you, you heard him begin to say something. I appreciate you taking the time to discuss this with me, for listening, in spite of, well. He gestured to himself, the meaning clear. Before you could tell him not to mention it, he reached for the door and came to face you. There was a mischievous grin on his face. He welcomed it like an old friend. But now, since the final act is over, how would we rate this event? I sincerely hope that it wasn't acceptable on the whole. The question had a laugh to it, and underneath there was the faintest hint of a self-mockery from before. But now it was toothless, empty of malice, and entirely in good humor. You couldn't help but snicker under your breath, full of affection. Oh, Baxter, how quickly he recovered his footing. A solid performance as always. I'm glad we did this, all of it. Thank you for a great evening out and for coming over afterwards. Why did he mumble that? Don't mention it. Pleasure was all mine. Good night, Princeton. See you soon. Until next time, good sir. Have a good night, Baxter. Bye. You reached out and squeezed his hand gently. You cheerily waved goodbye. Squeeze his hand! There was a moment of pause before Baxter looked down and squeezed yours in return. He pulled it up and suddenly thought he was about to kiss it. Instead, he stroked a thumb twice across your knuckles, still cool from the glass of water, and hummed a wordless noise of contentment. It was a comforting gesture, full of fond feeling. You stood like that a while, not speaking. Baxter liked you. Even if he didn't want you to know him, you were sure of that much. And then he made good on his promise to depart. Baxter stepped out into the dark night, the door shut behind him, and the long day came to a close along with it. When he was gone, you remained in the entryway a while, lost in thought. You'd see him again soon, perhaps tomorrow, perhaps not. He might have plans, but there would be a next time. You saw your face reflected in the dark glass window by the door, and found yourself wondering which Baxter you'd meet when the day came. Whoever he was, wherever he was, you'd be there. Aw, that was so sweet. Well, I'm gonna get going. We finally finished like one DLC in the allotted time, so I'm happy about that. I appreciate you guys so much for being here. My dog is being annoying. He's like, it's time to eat, and it's not time to eat yet. It's almost time for him to eat, so I need to like be with him so he's not being annoying. But yeah, thank you guys so much for being here. Today's Wednesday, right? So in the Discord, I will drop the Discord if you want to join the Discord, if you want to keep up with my shenanigans, what I'm doing, what I'm not doing, whatever I feel like doing, which is happening this week. I've been under a lot of pressure lately, myself. I've been putting it on myself. A lot's been going on with me mentally, and so I have decided that this week I'm going to do what I want, however I want to do it, in whichever order I want to do it in. So I do plan on streaming tomorrow. What time? Don't know, can't tell you. What am I streaming? Don't know, can't tell you. But it'll be something. It'll be something. But yeah, I appreciate you guys being here. Appreciate you guys sticking by. I hope you have a nice rest. Actually, you know what? No. I appreciate the lurkers. I appreciate the chatters. Appreciate the people who just stopped by and was like, okay, this person's weird. Appreciate that too, because, you know, a view's a view. A view's a view, a view's a view. A view's a view, a view's a view, a view's a view. But yeah, thank you guys so much for being here. I really appreciate it. I hope you have a nice rest of your day, week, month, year, and life. And I hope to see you in the next stream. Bye.